In October 2019, a massive strike forced the Ecuadorian government to cancel a decree that imposed austerity measures. The International Monetary Fund, the IMF, had required these measures in return for a $4.2 billion loan. Protest eventually forced President Lenin Moreno to the negotiation table. After state security forces failed to repress the growing numbers of people who took to the streets, the negotiations were broadcast on live TV, and Ecuadorians could see the indigenous leaders schooling the president and his ministers. Eventually, Ecuador's president gave in and canceled Decree number 883. Live on air, this unleashed a wave of celebration among the very same people that had previously been angrily protesting and banging pots and pans on the street. The Real News spoke with two of the indigenous leaders who debated President Moreno. This is Leonidas Issa, president of the Farmer and Indigenous Movement from Cotopaxi.
On October 13th, after the talks with the government, CONAIE's president called for calm and for the indigenous communities to return home, and it all went back to normal. If we had political pretensions or wanted to take down the government, then that wouldn't matter and protests would have continued. So we believe that an alleged coup is the Moreno government's attempt to cover up its terrible handling of the situation. They are looking for political manipulators where there are none. They even had agent provocateurs causing fires and damage to government buildings, sending agent provocateurs to be able to back their conspiracy theory.
Jaime Vargas is the president of the largest indigenous organization, the Confederation of Indigenous Nationalities of Ecuador, or CONAIE, which is an umbrella organization for all other indigenous groups. He is Ecuador's indigenous highest-ranking leader.
So we now delivered the IMF a defeat, and because of that, the IMF ordered the killing of the Ecuadorian people. I want to emphasize that. The IMF is a murderous international corporation. Murderous.
The violence had a serious toll on protesters and on public and private property.
There was unmeasured violence, 1,200 injured and 1,200 detained, 8 deaths, although today we learned of yet another fatality, so 9 deaths.
Andres Tapia is the communications director of CONFENAIE, short for Confederation of Indigenous Nationalities of the Ecuadorian Amazon.
They supported us through hard times, like when martial law was declared and they took to the streets, making their pots and pans sound, which made us feel their support. It was very important to us.
Leonidas Issa emphasized the discipline of the movement that mobilized an estimated 20,000 members. Many of them, according to him, joined in response to the unprecedented violence that Moreno government had unleashed on protesters. Mainstream media reinforced the government's perspective, portraying the protest as foreign-financed acts of vandalism by Venezuela's President Maduro and former President Correa, and the violence as an unprovoked action on the part of strike supporters. Recently, the Ecuadorian army changed its military doctrine from one of guarding the border to counterinsurgency as its main task. Defense Minister Osvaldo Jarrín from the School of the Americas announced that the government is applying anti-terrorism tactics to persecute those behind the uprising, which he sees as an attack on the state.
We had control over those within the structure of the indigenous organization, representing all 3 regions of our country. However, we need to point out that the violence and the plunder were a reaction by regular citizens against unprecedented state violence unleashed by the Moreno government. So over that, we had no control, which needs to be understood.
CONAIE President Vargas is now being investigated for rebellion.
We cannot dialogue with the government if they are indicting our leaders for rebellion. So if we have to take measures, we are ready to do that.
At the heart of the Ecuadorian government's accusation is that there is a conspiracy to overthrow the government. According to President Moreno,
I completely reject those stories, saying that the strike was orchestrated by Correa. We have nothing to do with him. The mobilization was organized by our movement. Our stance is stronger than ever. With the support of different social groups, we are stronger than ever.
If the government threw so much violence at the protesters, it is no surprise that now they are so publicly indicting our leaders. There are also death threats against us.
Follow The Real News for more on the issue.